Hi, Keith. It's wonderful to see you here.
It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, welcome to this celebration of 40 years of Intact Academy. We've been giving 40 years of accredited coach and consultancy training, so EMCC Senior Coach Accredited and TA. Um, and I thought to celebrate that, I'd speak to the people I respect and know and like to talk about what their passion is within TA and within their field of work. So I'm absolutely delighted you're here as well. Um, I know that this is the 10th anniversary of the book on co-creativity and the 25th year of the article on co-creativity. So huge celebrations for that and the influence it's had on TA. For those of us who don't know you, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself. Who are you today?
That's a lovely question. Well, first of all, I want to thank you again for inviting me and also to congratulate you on 40 years of Intact Academy. That's an awesome, very wonderful achievement. My name's Keith Tudor. I'm a professor of psychotherapy at Auckland University of Technology here in Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau, Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I would say Tenakwe, greetings to you. The rangatira leader, and tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, which is a greeting to everybody. In terms of TA, I'm a certified transactional analyst in the field of psychotherapy as a clinician and also a teaching and supervising transactional analyst. One of the things I'm passionate about is education
Yes.
and education rather than training. And of course, I'm known with Graham Summers for having co-created what we called co-creative TA. And interestingly, that was probably more picked up in the field of education and to some extent organisations than it was in the clinical fields.
So, the book is fantastic, and yes, I do use it a lot in the organizations because it is such a refreshing change from the authoritarian, usually theories that we have in organizations. But for the people who don't know about co-creativity, can you tell us what's specific about it?
Well, I think co-creativity emphasizes two things really. One is the co, so it's very much looking at the kind of mutuality, mutual influence, co-influence that people have on each other. And of course, the creative bit emphasizes the creativity because I think we essentially, as practitioners, and I'll probably speak more as in the field of psychotherapy, we I think we're different with each client and even different with the same client in different sessions. And the creativity kind of emphasizes that more sort of unique, improvised, intuitive. I'm doing that kind of movement between me and the client or me and the students. If I say there was one thing, I think it's about really claiming and acknowledging co-influence.
Yeah. So some would argue that Berne himself started co-creativity. He stepped down from the psychiatry place and really made that relational almost TA.
Yeah,
Every concept describes a pattern, so it is co-creative in itself.
yeah, yeah.
What drove you to focus on that specifically when, some would argue all of TA is co-creative?
Well, I think that's a great question, and in some ways, I want to say yes. I'm always when I write both about co-creativity and other things in TA, I always go back to Berne, and I agree. I think it was a very interesting character because he was in some ways socially quite conservative. But you
Mhm.
think about the way that he revolutionized practice in the psychiatric hospitals, by getting rid of the two-way mirror, insisting that staff spoke in front of patients, the staff patient conferences. They would be radical now in psychiatry, and I speak as an ex-psychiatric social worker. So I think he was very non-hierarchical, very, probably from a more liberal than radical position. But in some ways, I think we are reclaiming some of Berne's vision, and particularly around the simple language. I think TA's got far too jargonistic and loaded with models and so on. And people might say, well, I'm part of the problem because I write a lot and create a lot. But I do think one of the things when I teach co-creative TA, I say we're reclaiming the simplicity that Berne,
Crispness. Yeah.
the crispness and so on.
Yeah, Structure and Dynamics is one of the books I reread every 2 years because every time I see something different, and it's almost the act of reading is co-creative when you read
Absolutely.
Burns books.
Yeah, and finding little things like I wrote an article last year, it was published last year or 2 years ago on war and used his group dynamics and some elements that I hadn't even remembered. And so when I reread them, I thought this is great. It's looking at the intrusion of the external boundary and what happens inside groups and nations when they get attacked and so on. So that was yeah, I agree. And also principles of group treatment, as I think particularly more in the psychotherapy field, it's just the best book. It's all there, all
Yeah.
his operations and so on. So I think in many ways the project of co-creativity has been, we often present it as a rereading of TA. It's not a new school. We're not saying we want to create a thing within TA. We're kind of rereading TA from a more egalitarian perspective, from trying to simplify or re-simplify the language, and also from a perspective that acknowledges health psychology.
Yes, and it's interesting because I do the same thing with Structure and Dynamics, but to figure out what are the criteria for health in an organization is actually
Yeah,
always contextual. So it
it is.
depends on your purpose.
Yeah,
There is no best structure, there is no best dynamic. It depends on what you want to do with it.
yeah,
Um, and in that sense,
lovely.
you're also continuously in relationship to your context.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always health, even when there's, pathology, whether in an organization, which you'll know more about, or in an individual, there's always health going on as well.
Yes.
I remember a colleague because I also, uh, um, I've written as much in the sort of person-centered world, the world of person-centered psychology, Rogerian psychology. And I remember talking to a colleague who's also in favor of health, and he worked in a psychiatric hospital, and the nurses were coming to him as a psychologist and saying, "Oh, this person's lying on the floor, and he's causing a obstruction in the corridor," and we're just distressed about him. And this friend of mine, Dion van Verde, said, "Did he watch the football last night? Did he have supper? Did he have a good night's sleep? Did he get up, dress himself, go to have breakfast?" So he was doing, in effect, a health check and supporting the health. And he said, "My solution to the problem is to put a pillow under
Yes.
leave him
Yes.
lying in the corridor, but just put a pillow under his head so that he doesn't hurt himself."
So we were talking about context and, if health is contextual, and you were talking about your colleague doing health checks, which is, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Um, I know you focus on context a lot, especially I've noticed since you live in New Zealand, you're really embracing the Maori culture as well. How
Mm.
does that influence your psychotherapy work?
That's another great question. When we visited, we fell in love with the land and we're very sort of just almost in love with the people that we met. And there's the project here, which at best, it's not perfect by any means, but the kind of engagement of the settlers with Māori indigenous culture, we were very touched by and very impressed with. I think it's sort of cool to me in some ways. I've always been a what some people refer to as a context guy because I tend to talk about the impact of the social, for instance, on people's individual lives or even the problems that they're bringing. We know from research, the research is often quoted in psychotherapy that the therapeutic relationship is the most important factor rather than particular techniques. Interestingly, in that same piece of research, which is now also about 40 years old, 40% of the effectiveness of or the impact on the successful outcome was to do with context, to do with environmental factors, to do with whether somebody's homeless or not, whether they can afford therapy, whether their family's supporting them to come to therapy, or whether therapy becomes a problem in the relationship, things like that. So I've always been persuaded, and I think, with a background in social work, I tend to think socially first. Something about people being indigenous and belonging here, and the settlers, the white people being the settlers, the migrants, does change something about, power dynamics. It changes things about how you think about welcoming people and so on. And as I say, I don't want to be glowing but I think it's very humbling. I think that's one of the things that I just realize as I get older how little I know.
Mm.
And um,
Yes.
and of course, in some ways, I don't belong here. I'm not indigenous to this country. So when I introduce myself more fully in Te Reo Māori, one of the things I'll say is Ke te whenua o te kawaroa maki toku kāinga naianei, which means my house sits on the land of the local iwi, and I think partly because of my politics, I come and I've sort of, it's almost it's full circle because I came into TA as a political activist, and I'm kind of here at the end, more near the end of my career, and becoming probably more politically active, particularly around this stuff, decolonising the curriculum here at the university, things like that. Those things matter to me, and positioning myself as a settler who needs to learn and needs to be maybe unsettled. One of
Yeah.
my latest publications is a chapter in a book, and it's called S is for Settler. And it's about the sort of psychosocial position of being a settler, but also being unsettled, not
Yes.
knowing, not having so much authority, being the second, being the third, rather than the first,
Being
being
other.
decentered,
Yeah.
being other, yeah,
Yeah.
being other.
Yeah.
Because as we know, and of course, this has been one of the problems experienced by Maori is that they have been othered in their own land,
Mm.
which is very, you know, uh, it's heavy. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
That's colonialism for you.
Yeah. Yes.
I
Yes.
don't know
An
if I answered your
interesting.
question. It felt like a bit of a riff, but
No.
I think if anything, emigrating here 15 years ago has enhanced my interest in context.
Yes, and influences your psychotherapy work actively. I
Absolutely.
would think.
Yes, and whether that's working with Māori, and if I have worked with Māori therapeutically, and we start with, like a blessing, and I might do that sometimes, and the client might do that sometimes, but that's already the context is in the room. But even with non-Māori, still acknowledging the context that we're both standing on different land.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. It's not for sissies getting older, as they say. But
No, no,
I really think this gain of humility and seeing the whole picture is one of the huge benefits of getting older, I think.
yeah.
One of
I have.
the real things I know about you and also I identify with is your bit of a rebellious nature. So you're what did you call it? An appreciative critique or a mild or gentle agitator within the
Yeah,
TA world.
yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
not so gentle at times.
So, no, no, but I think, this is the thing from a systems perspective. Berne talks about dynamics. And sometimes people think systems are better if there's no dynamics, but actually, without dynamics, we wouldn't have innovation. So
Right. Yeah.
it's better if this cohesion and agitation kind of goes hand in hand. But
Yeah,
I
I
know
agree.
you as someone. like me, who also agitates within the system
Yeah.
and provides a different point of view. I know
Yeah.
you've written a lot about it, but what are you busy with at this moment in time in terms of, gentle critique or?
Well, one of the things that when you talk about agitation, yeah, and you also know me as a theorist, one of the things that I agitate about is the way that TA nominalizes things. So, for instance, we have this idea of the critical parent, which kind of implicitly places, well, explicitly places critique only in the parent and
Yeah,
negatively so. So, one of my agitations has been promoting the idea of the critical adult,
yeah,
even the rebellious adult, because sometimes it's appropriate to the here and now to be critical and to be rebellious. So, by Berne's definition, that there must be the possibility of a critical adult and a rebellious adult. So that's, I suppose I'm busy with that on a number of levels. The most right now, I've just decided to rewrite an early book, which was a book on a critical examination of psychotherapy. So I found a new publisher called Egalitarian Press, interestingly enough, and the guy there is saying, take the opportunity to sort of update it. And so I'm putting in two new chapters, one on culture and one on language, because I think we're at a historical stage where, given what's going on in the world, language itself is coming under attack. Truth. We're in post-truth politics, all these kind of things, and I really worry about the way that language is being used, the sort of new culture wars. So I'm really, I'm busy with that. And what I'm going to do is basically give old copies of the book that I've got to some colleagues and say, what do you think I need to add? I've got these ideas, but also to also share the input in terms of what people. So it's almost like I want people to stretch me into what I need to think about and write about next. I know I want to write about culture, and I had one of the reasons is that I had quite a disturbing experience earlier this year where a colleague, a UK colleague outside TA, wrote an article which was just full of hate, anti-woke, anti-political correctness. It was just it felt like a bilious attack on everything and anything in the field of counselling psychotherapy. He sent it to a journal, uh, Psychotherapy and Politics International, which I have a long association with. I finished 2 years ago being editor. The current editor said, "Oh my God, what should we do with this?" And contacted me and said, "Would you write a rejoinder?" So I did. And I wrote a kind of pretty forensic thing, line by line. This is wrong. This is fact check, da 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 da. And the deal was that they would publish his article and they would publish my rejoinder, alongside it. Now, what is interesting, two couple of interesting things. One is they decided to publish his without any review and any editing. So it was just in there.
Wow.
Partly because I think they feared his response if they'd edited at all, or rejected it. So the two were going to be published like that. He then got a copy of mine and went ballistic and accused me, came back and said it was outrageous, all personal attacks, which it wasn't, and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking about this with a friend, and he said, really, the smart thing would be to reach out and have a dialogue with him. I was going, this is the last thing I want to do. But I did, sort of despite myself. But because I do think we need, I need to kind of talk to people who are trying to rip up the foundation document of New Zealand. I want to talk to Trump supporters and so on. Somebody has to kind of do that, or we have to reach across the divide. So
Right.
anyway, I did reach across the divide, and I have to say it was a very unpleasant experience, actually for both of us, because we just positioned, we couldn't hear each other.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get beyond that in this next book. And so that's what I'm busy with, trying to get beyond, but trying to analyze what's going on and what's going wrong, particularly around culture and language.
Yeah. How can we maintain dialogue in a world today, really?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and TA should be able to help us, but it is very, very difficult. This stance of staying okay when you're being directly attacked
Yeah.
is an interesting, this kind of gesture attitude.
Yeah, and being, I mean, I think you have as well, but I certainly experienced some pretty vicious attacks within TA
Mm,
on some of the things that I have dared to say, and they haven't been, I don't think they've been earth-shattering, but I've had kind of hate mail,
mm.
and that's not good. And I know we're going to be at the World Conference in August, and that's going to be, Russian colleagues there who support Putin's the, the Russian war, the invasion of Ukraine. I know there's Trump supporters within the TA community, which to me seems odd because it's not that I don't think we should have a political range. I think some of the values don't fit with
Yes.
TA values, which are broadly humanistic, and I think TA is broadly humanistic. Psychotherapy is an enlightenment enterprise, so I think that's what I was trying to get at with this UK colleague.
Going to be an interesting meeting. That's we
It
know.
is going to be an interesting meeting for sure.
Yeah.
And the only thing, the sort of final, the bit of with the articles is that now what's good is that there are three articles in the public domain. There's the original article, which is for me a bit of a diatribe. There's my kind of forensic analysis, and then there's this attempt of these two white guys trying to sort of talk to each other and failing. But I think as a whole project, it kind of could be a case study.
So we're at the end, unfortunately, of this conversation. But I always ask people, is there anything, if people are coming up in these professions of being a TA psychotherapist, what advice would you give them?
A great question. I love your questions. Um, my advice would be, I think, probably passing on some advice that I've had over the years. One of which was to stay independent.
Yeah.
Be absolutely belong, but also stay independent. And I would add, as a critical thinker. Um, and I think, to me, one of the strengths of TA is that to become a certified transactional analyst, you have to work out your relationship with TA. So
Mm.
becoming qualified in TA is a journey of integration. I suppose it's something like people, being themselves, staying true to themselves, their values, particularly their culture, whatever their identity is, and finding a way to express that within TA. Because I
Keeping
think
your own
TA,
voice and belonging. That's
exactly, yeah, yeah.
life's journey.
Life's journey. One of my next book projects will be a book on TA and activism.
Yeah.
So, I suppose I'm trying to help that next generation find that confidence, be able to quote some of what people like us write and, build, just as we stand on the shoulders of giants, and for me in TA, mostly women, actually. I hope that I can lend my shoulders to the next generation.
Thank you, Keith, for this conversation.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.